Hi everyone. I'm very sorry that I haven't been able to upload any vlogs or do a decent vlog for a while, but as a lot of you already know, I had my baby, so that is a very valid excuse, I think. Basically, after we went out and celebrated my auntie's birthday at a Chinese restaurant, we were going to go out and look at Christmas lights. This was on the 18th of December, but I decided that I was probably too tired and stuff, so we didn't go. Instead, we spent about 3 or so hours talking to my brother and my family, just random stuff really. So we just, parked the car near the beach and we just talked about life in general. And we were talking about things like him moving out of home and the options he may have in the future and just all that sort of thing. It was a very nice, heart-to-heart sort of talk, and it's the first time I've been able to talk like that for years. So that was quite a nice way to spend the night. And then we came home. Then about 2 a.m. on the 19th of December, which was a Friday, I was about to go to bed. I was filling up my water bottle. This was only about an hour after we had got home, and I had a last piece of my birthday cake because my birthday was on the 15th, so only 4 days ago since, before that. So I had a piece of my birthday cake and a glass of chocolate milk, and then at 2 a.m. I went to fill up my water bottle ready for bed. So I was about to go to bed, and then as I was about to fill up my water bottle, my waters broke all over the kitchen floor. I was about to fill up my water bottle to take to bed, and when I was at the sink, I just randomly started peeing or something. I didn't feel like I needed to go. And we collected a bit of it and it's got some slight pink tinge. And so I think my water just broke, but I'm not sure. I haven't really had contractions or anything. I didn't think the baby's head was engaged. And we're about 15 days off the due date, so I wasn't really anticipating it yet. I had some slight feeling like I needed to poo a little bit. But I did have some Dulcolax today, and usually this is about the time that kicks in to make me feel like I need to poo. So I just assumed it was that, but I don't know. So yeah, I could go into labour today or tomorrow or the next day, or I may have just peed myself and not realised, I don't know. But interesting, isn't it? I'm pretty sure that it was my waters because it didn't smell like pee, it didn't look like pee. I was unable to control it. And yeah, so it had pink fluid. It smelled quite different to anything that's ever come out of that orifice before. So yeah, it was, in my eyes, definitely my fluids breaking or leaking, whatever. It was probably at least a cup, 1 to 3 cups, something like that. Then eventually I needed to, have a bowel movement. Hi, so after I peed all over the floor, which I'm pretty damn sure now was my water breaking, just based on the amount of fluid, and after I recorded that I ended up, more came out, so I think maybe the baby's head was acting as a plug. Then I went to have a shower and I checked, my pad and the underwear and stuff, and there was like a little bit of blood, not much at all, just like tiny flecks of blood. Maybe 3 or 4. The pad was a little bit pinkish on one edge, even more than we saw in the liquid. And there was quite a bit, obviously, and it was very sticky consistency that I'm not used to. It wasn't the same as like cum or anything, or just your normal cervical juices. It was sort of a little bit more gluggy and clearer, sort of beige in colour almost. While I was in the shower I felt a lot of pain. This still could be just the regular pain I get when I need to poo, or it could be contractions starting. But right now I'm on the toilet and I just pooed and all this fluid came out when I pooed, like there's a lot of fluid. So I'm assuming that was the rest of the waters or something, I don't know. There was no mucus plug or anything that I've noticed, but I'm not sure. What else? Yeah, and now I'm starting to get slight reminiscent feeling of, my family call it the brick, but when you have a period, there's like pressure really, really low, like in your vagina and your pelvis, and I'm starting to feel that. And there's pain down there on and off. So I'm fairly sure, like 90% sure, that this is the onset of labour. And then I started to have really, really mild contractions. They weren't even as bad as period pain, really. It was really, really mild. The only reason I decided to ring the hospital is because they were 5 minutes apart. So now we're just timing the contractions, if that's even what they are. I don't know. This kind of feels like the pain I usually get before I need a poo, after I've been constipated for a few days, which I think I have, I don't know. With a very slight hint of vaginal pain, I don't know. But yeah, they seem to be very, very short and regular, like a few minutes, but I don't even know if what I'm feeling is proper, like, contractions. I don't know. I'm just sitting here timing. I'm going to try and keep as forward as I can for as long as I can, although I'm not very comfortable right now. But we'll see. But yeah, it is 2:50 AM. Yeah, the only other update I have at the moment is that when I wiped after all that fluid came out, it was very pink, so it's definitely blood in there. Which means, for sure, pretty much, my waters are broken. I didn't notice the mucus plug, as I said, but yeah, definitely there was blood. So I rang them up and they said, oh yeah, that's fine, no big deal, just come in and we'll probably send you home in 20 minutes anyway. So we packed the hospital bag anyway, which we hadn't even had time to repack. I was going to do that. And then about half an hour later we drove down. In the car, my contractions were about 10 minutes apart, maybe 5 to 10, so they'd slowed down a little bit. And they were anywhere from 30 seconds to a minute apart. I mean long, sorry, minute long. Yeah, so that was interesting. Then we sat in the waiting room for probably 15 minutes. I didn't really have many contractions there at all, if any. I took a little clock in, which had a timer on it, which I accidentally left in the car and found melted later on, but oh well. Yeah, so my contractions didn't really start up again until we were in the room. And they were quite severe from then on, so they got worse and worse and worse. And after probably 15 minutes to half an hour of being in the room, they were quite unbearable. I asked to be checked for dilation, and they said that I wasn't dilated and that my waters hadn't even broken and they were going to send me home. I thought to myself, how could I possibly go home with this excruciating severe pain? And I basically refused. And then they went out, and then about probably 5 to 10 minutes after that, I felt like I really, really, really needed to poo, like really badly. So I went to the toilet, nothing came out except just more fluid. I collected a sample of it and it was quite red. And then I came back, sat on the bed, and I just felt like I had to push really badly. But I didn't realise, you know, what was about to happen. I just thought, oh, I must be dilating or something like that. So then I was pushing, and I did 3 or 4 really, really good pushes on the bed. And then after I went to the toilet again, thinking I had to poo again, someone checked the bed and they said, oh, that was your waters breaking. But I know for myself that it wasn't, because it was just me pushing more fluid out, and it was the same kind of fluid that I'd been excreting before. So I'm pretty sure my fluids did break on the kitchen floor, and that was just extra fluid that was being blocked by the baby's head. So then after I went to the toilet for the 2nd or 3rd time, something like that, and just was fluid coming out, I needed to push on the toilet really bad. There was a sort of student midwife, I think, student one, and she just came in and she said, oh, would you like some Panadol? And I just said, I don't know, I just don't know what to do, I feel really bad. And then she just walked out, and they decided not to send me home because of how much pain I seemed to be in, but they still didn't think that I was dilated or whatever, so not that they checked at that point, they just had a guess. And then they suggested I go in the shower just for my back to have water running down it, which ended up being really soothing. I sat on a chair in the shower, and my husband just sort of rubbed my back a bit. But that's when the contractions were quite severe. So between that and the toilet was when it was the worst, I would say. And I was only in there for maybe 10-15 minutes, by the way, so I don't think I was in there for very long at all. Probably up to half an hour, I don't think. It would have been longer than that. So yeah, I was on this chair in the shower and I was pushing really badly. No, I didn't even mean to push, I wasn't forcing it. It was just my body, that's what it wanted to do. You know, it wasn't like, oh, I have to push now. It was just, I can't deal with it, you know, what do I do? Kind of thing. And I was a bit freaked out because I thought this was the onset of labour. You know, I thought if this is the start of labour, how bad does real labour get, you know? So the lady said, oh, well, you know, would you like to try some gas and air? So I thought, yeah, okay, if this is the onset of labour and it's this painful, then I probably need some pain relief quite soon. So I was reluctant to get out the shower because it was so comfortable. But when I got out the shower thinking that, oh, there's going to be gas and air right on the bed there, I got out and I was a bit disappointed because there wasn't gas and air there yet, so I should have just stayed in the shower. So as soon as I got to the bed, I was really, really in pain. I was, you know, jerking. Some ladies were trying to stick the IV drip thing in my arm and do the, what do you call it? I don't know, some machine thing where they check my heart rate and the baby's heart rate. I forgot what it's called now. Yeah, and they were like, oh, can you just lay on your back? Can you keep still? And I said, no, I can't keep still. And I had to be on my right side. I had to just lay on my right side and convulse kind of thing. And my husband was just kind of there going like, what do I do? You know. Yeah, I think he was holding my hand and maybe rubbing my back or something. I don't know. I don't really remember. But I was lucky it was a double bed. The bathroom and bedroom was actually really big because it was the low births area, and I thought that because I'm so big and stuff, I'd be in the high risk area, which has small beds. So I'm really grateful that I was able to birth on a double bed, which was good. And yeah, the toilet and bath and shower was really, really good. So, well, big. I didn't try the bath, but yeah. So anyway, when I got on the bed, they were trying to do all these drips and stuff and not finding my veins because I was a bit dehydrated. So that didn't work out well. And the lady who was doing the IV and everything was actually the gynecologist who first told me I was pregnant. So that's kind of nice. You know, her name was Lynn. And she was quite nice. She didn't quite recognise me when she walked in the room. And then I was like, oh, hi, Lynn. And she was a bit taken aback. And then it kind of clicked. She's like, oh, I remember you, you know. Because originally I went in to check if I'd had a complex cyst. And they said I was pregnant. So, yeah, a bit of trivia. Anyway, so when I got on the bed, there was no gas and air. I was kind of annoyed at that, you know. So I was like, oh, can I go back in the shower then? They said they wanted to check my dilation and see if I could stay. And when they opened up my legs to check the dilation, they said, oh, he's crowning. So, you know, I said, how many centimetres dilated is that? And they said, fully, which I knew. I just needed that reassurance that that is what was happening. You know, because he went from none to 10, and I thought by that point I'd be 3 centimetres dilated or something like that. But no, fully crowning, so I said, holy shit. And that's about the only time I swore during the whole labour. I wasn't really a screamer, despite what I thought would happen. I didn't really swear. I think when the midwives went out at one point, I just kept saying the F word to my husband. Just like, F, this hurts, you know. But beyond that, I didn't really swear, so yay for me. So anyway, then they just said, oh, push slowly. And I said, I don't know what that means. And my birth plan, it said to tell me whether to pant or push, which is the terminology I understood. You know, because I know that you can tear your muscles and stuff if you push too fast. So I didn't want an episiotomy, if that's what it's called. So then I just pushed, and I thought it was weird because I didn't actually have a contraction. I thought you're supposed to wait for the contractions and push on those, but I didn't have one, so I pushed anyway because she said push. And then the baby just came out like in one go. My husband did 3 photos in that whole time, and he said that it took 22 seconds from crowning to born. So it was really, really quick. And of course, I had a 3rd degree tear. I think that's what it's called. Which means your vagina's teared all the way down to like halfway through your anus kind of thing. And you have 2 tears in my anus externally, I think. I'm not sure about internally, but I know that externally I've got 2 tears on my anus. or whatever you call it. So my perineum, I think, is the middle part. I think that's totally like torn completely. So then I was bleeding a lot, and they reckon I lost about 800 ml minimum on the bed, which I saw afterwards, and it looked pretty gory. You know, it looked like a murder scene or something. So then they were just pushing on my stomach really, really, really bad, and it really hurt. And somebody yelled out, "It's a boy," even though in my birth plan I wanted to be able to check that for myself. You know, I wanted to hold the baby and see the gender. So some obnoxious woman yelled out, "It's a boy." So we knew immediately his name was going to be Liam Andrew Townsend. So we just told them that. That was fine. He didn't cry when he was born. He just sort of went, you know, which is good enough for me. It means he's alive. So that was good. Then they took him away, and they dealt with him, you know, whatever. And then they were just like pushing on my stomach really, really hard. And that for me actually felt worse than the birth, I think. I yelled at them to stop pushing on me, and they said, "We can't, it's an emergency, we have to, it's very important." So I just, you know, struggled through that. I was really crying at that point because it really hurt. Yeah, and then they let me try and breastfeed for 10 minutes. He didn't latch onto the left side at all, but the right side, he pulled really, really hard, and it really hurt. So he tried that for 10 minutes, and then they said that I had to go into surgery. So they took him away, decided to stay with the baby rather than come with me, which is fine. So yeah, bearing in mind at this point, I hadn't actually seen the gender for myself, and I'd only had a 10-minute hold of him. So it's a bit sad. And I was laying down that whole time, so I couldn't really check him thoroughly or anything like that. And I didn't see the name tag be put on, so, you know, I didn't know later on that the child I was holding was actually mine because I hadn't seen any of that happen. Anyway, so then I went into surgery, and I think I was in there for 45 minutes. I was getting stitches. They kept calling them sutures though, so I don't know if they're called sutures. I don't know. Anyway, so I asked them how many they put in afterwards, and by the way, I had a spinal for it, which didn't hurt too badly. They said an epidural was slightly worse, but yeah. Apparently I was giggling the entire time and stuff like that. They were playing 90s music from YouTube during the procedure. And even though I was supposed to be numb, I could feel my toes a little bit, and they did push down on my stomach really hard again, and I felt that. I could feel that a lot, actually. But they said, well, if we don't do it now, we're just going to have to do it when you wake up, so may as well be now. I said, fair enough. So yeah, I asked them how many stitches they put in, and they said, how long's a piece of string? They said they didn't know, and that they just don't count them because it's just one big long thread anyway. But I gather it was probably hundreds of individual in and out, you know, stitcher things. So yeah, they implied that it was the second to worst kind of tear you can have. I'm assuming the worst is completely up the anus as well. Wouldn't be fun. Yeah, so even though I had a really, really speedy birth and stuff, the aftermath is still lengthy and stuff. They said it could take 4 to 6 weeks to heal the stitches and everything. I had to have a catheter because of the spinal and all that sort of thing, which really hurt when they put that in, by the way. And the dilation really hurt as well. Or the checking the first time. Yeah, so then after the surgery, I went off to some place where they sort of check you, make sure that you're coming to properly and that I didn't have any nerve damage or anything like that. The guy who saw me there was quite obviously gay. Not that that matters, but, you know, he had that really gay, sort of well-spoken voice. It was quite funny. And he just basically put ice on me in various areas, like my chest and my arms and my legs, and he said, "Does this feel cold? Does this feel cold?" And a lot of times I said no, or it would take 10 minutes for me to be able to feel the cold. He said that was okay, but it was a bit unusual, so I was a little bit worried. I think I was in that room for probably an hour and a half. Basically everybody was on staff and they wanted to have their break. I think they were having their Christmas break up that day, and everybody wanted to leave, so we had people cutting queues and saying, oh, well, I have to do this thing, it's really important, can I go now? And then that lady got stood down by the senior midwife who said, well, this guy was here first, you know, he has to go. So nobody actually bothered to find out what room I was supposed to go to or anything like that. So I was just there for an hour and a half, you know, wondering where my baby is, where my husband is, what's happening, you know, because, yeah, they didn't even tell me that, you know, what happened there, so I didn't know. Yeah, but the gay doctor was really, oh, his name was Louis, by the way, I think, yeah, Louis. He was concerned because there was no paperwork regarding my spinal. So because the hospital was manic and everything was full, I ended up in the border room, which is bed 1, which wasn't too bad. I didn't have anyone next to me, so that was fine, even though there was a spare bed there. Yeah, the thing I didn't like, though, is that I was in that room for 3 hours or so, maybe more, by myself, and I had no idea what was happening. Nobody told me where my husband or my baby was, even though my birth plan said I wanted to be with them at all times. Nothing was said. I didn't know anything about what was happening like that. I couldn't feel my legs, so I was really scared. I couldn't go to the toilet. I had this catheter thing, you know. Also, I hadn't eaten since, as I said before, about 1 a.m. or 1:30 a.m. that day, and this was coming up to probably somewhere between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. and I still hadn't eaten. So I asked if I could eat, but I didn't know because I had the spinal, so they said I couldn't. So I'll just backtrack a bit and I'll tell you the story with the food. So when I gave birth at 7:24 a.m., the food tray for breakfast had just come out just before the birth. I think they give you breakfast about 7, but because I was, you know, in labour, they took the breakfast away. Apparently it was going to be cornflakes or something like that. So they took that away, so that's why I didn't have breakfast, and then it probably just got overlooked because of the surgery needing to be done and all that sort of thing. And then during lunch I was in surgery, so of course, you know, I can't eat if you're getting a spinal. I think you have to have a 2 or 3 or something hour fast before and after, but I don't know. And then afterwards, you know, I was just stuck in that room for an hour and a half, just, you know, being checked if I was okay. So I didn't even think about food. So it got to about probably at least 3 p.m. before I even thought about, oh, I need to be eating soon. So I asked somebody who came in to just, I don't know, I think they were trying to tell me something. I don't even know what. I was too zonked on morphine, which, by the way, I said in my birth plan I didn't want morphine, but they gave it to me without even asking or telling me. But yeah, anyway, I was also asked if I would do a blood transfusion. I said okay, but I don't actually know if I ended up having one or not. I suspect I didn't, but I don't know. My husband just said that the nurse who got me a sandwich actually paid for it with her own money, so that was really nice of her. I thought she just found it on some old lunch tray and gave it to me because it was a bit weird and tasted a bit old, but oh well. Yeah, so that's most of the story. And then my husband came to visit me and he told me that the baby had had respiratory issues because of the shock of the birth being so fast. And that he was in the special care nursery. So yeah, he told me that, but I didn't get to see the baby until much later. I think maybe 9 p.m. that night, maybe the next day, I can't remember. It was that night, yeah, about 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. that night. After my husband came and everything, he said that we could go and see the baby. So they got a wheelchair because my legs were still numb and everything, and I had the catheter, so I couldn't really walk with that too easily. So they got me a wheelchair, and then we went down to the special care nursery to go and visit him. When I went there, he was all sort of tied up with lots of cables and stuff for monitors because they were monitoring things like his heart rate, his oxygen levels, and all kinds of things like that. It was kind of sad to see him sort of all tied up. He had this big thing on his arm with like a drip, and he had I think it's called a gavage or something in his nose, which helps him feed, because of course I hadn't been there all day. He hadn't been able to have any breast milk, I couldn't express in surgery or anything like that. So he's just been topped up with formula and things through a little tube through his nose. So it was kind of sad. He was on his stomach. They said that he really liked to be on his stomach rather than on his back. My husband says later on that when he first saw him in the crib, he was actually shuffling forward on his knees, and they had to pin him down to the mattress. It's because he kept tripping the monitors. So that's funny. His strength is actually really, really good for his age and everything. I'll get to that later. Yeah, so I was able to sort of touch him through the doors and stuff. I was a bit hesitant though because, him being so fragile looking and stuff, I didn't know what I could and couldn't do. So I was kind of being guided as to what I could do and where I could touch him and that sort of thing. And then what must have been half an hour to an hour later or something, I was asked if I'd like to hold him. So they took him out of the machine, or the crib thing, humidity crib, and I think I held him skin to skin, but that may have been the next day, I don't know. I think I did. And then a little while after that, they said, would I like to try breastfeeding? I think. Maybe. I'm not sure. Maybe not. I'm not sure. Anyway, that was the next day. So I didn't get to breastfeed that night. But I held him skin to skin, and shortly after I was given him, I think I was able to hold him, and then like 5-10 minutes maybe later, my auntie and Nana and her boyfriend and Mandy's friend Karen came. So Des, Amy, Mandy and Karen. And yeah, so they said that only 2 at a time could see him. I was being surrounded by all these shields and stuff though, because obviously my chest was out and stuff, so I think that's why. So they decided that Mandy and Nana should come first. Amy's Nana, by the way. So yeah, they came and they looked at him, but because it was so fragile and he was all tied up and stuff, they didn't really hold him or anything like that. They just looked. But because they'd only come about 10 minutes before closing time, or the visiting hours were shut, they only got to see him for a couple of minutes, and then they let Des and Karen see him. But again, they didn't get to hold him because I'd only just held him myself, and he was all tied up and everything. So yeah, and that's about all I remember from that day. Then I held him for a little bit longer, and then I went back to the room. Kind of sad because he was still in there and I couldn't, hold him and stuff. So I was a bit sad. Like, all night, I mean, like you're supposed to. Yeah, so that's as much as I remember about that. And then the next few days are a blur. Just random people came to visit. I still didn't get to hold the baby in the room or anything. The next day I got to try and breastfeed. He's quite a good latcher most of the time, but he doesn't really take enough, so he still had the gavage in for a long time. And he was being topped up with formula and stuff. And then when I was finally able to express breast milk, or colostrum back then, which was yellow, which I didn't expect it to be yellow. It's something they don't really tell you. So I had that for about 4 days. Now I'm only just starting to get the white milk now. Anyway, so I was able to express about 0.5 ml or something like that. And then over a while, it ended up being 1 ml and then 2 ml, and then 5 ml, then 10 ml, then 20 ml. And yeah, at the moment I can express about 20 ml per side. Whereas at first it was 0.5 ml in total. So yeah, 20 ml each side now, so about 40 ml. So yeah, anyway, after that I was just expressing and he was having my top-ups, like however much breast milk I could produce plus about 30 ml or 40 ml of formula, which was, okay, if that's what he needed, that's fine. I think he's just waking up now. So, yeah, anyway, hospital food was interesting. Some of it was nice, some of it was horrible. The best things I ate was yogurt with berry and apple and berry crumble or something like that, which I ate it so fast I didn't even realise that that's what I was eating until there was like 3 mouthfuls left. So I wish that I'd paid more attention to that. The worst thing I ate was just, it looked like gruel. I don't know what it was. It's like some meat gruel thing. I don't know, and beans and stuff. Oh, and I was supposed to be on high fibre diet because of the stitches. They didn't want me ripping anything by, producing a hard poo or anything. So I've been on a very, very high fibre diet, but for the first few days or so, they kept bringing me white bread and cornflakes and stuff and no fruit. So it was really hard. And they kept saying, oh, you should be on Metamucil. But I've had chronic constipation for most of my life. So I said Metamucil doesn't really work for me. I usually have Dulcolax or Movicol. So then they put me on Movicol and Caloxil. And it took me probably 3 or 4, maybe 5 days or so to be able to actually go to the toilet properly. So that's why I didn't get discharged for so long, because they were just waiting for me to have a bowel movement pretty much. Urinating was fine, but yeah, pooing was hard. So I basically just waited until it came out by itself and I didn't have to push, So because I was in there for so long, they moved me from the border room to another room, which I was only in for 1 day. But that's the room that had the better internet access. So there was a day when I just went on Facebook and messaged and said what was happening, and that's the day that I was in there. And I met this really nice lady. I don't even know her name or her child's name. I think her child's name started with an M. It was a girl. I don't know. Like Mally or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, she had 5 kids and she was talking to me about her births and how everything went. So she was a really good help with breastfeeding. And I think that's why my breastfeeding technique is as good as it is now, because she helped me with that. There was also another nurse there. I don't know her name either. There were so many people, it's hard to know all their names. And she was really, really nice. We ended up sitting in the nursing room for a few hours one night, and we just talked about all things children, like breastfeeding, how to grow up with different religions, things like what school they should go to and when to book schools. And then I noticed that I had really sore, inflamed legs, so I asked her to have a look because I knew that she probably would, because she's so nice. And she just said, oh, you might have varicose veins or blood clots. And she said that I needed to go to the women's assessment unit as soon as I could. But at this point it was like really late at night, so I didn't, because it was sharp. So I went the next day and they said that I had blood clots in the superficial vein on my left leg and similar in the right leg. But yeah, the ultrasound that I had to do was ridiculous. Basically, I had to stand on this bed thing that tilts like that, and so it wasn't like a flat bed, it just was like that, tilt table, whatever. And yeah, basically to get the ultrasound and stuff, she had to push on the veins to get the Doppler thing working. So whenever there was a vein that she wanted to explore, she pushed really hard. So she was like, oh, does this hurt? And I said, yeah, and then she pushed harder. So it was really, really, really painful. Probably just as bad as the birth process, I would say. It really hurt. So after that, I was crying because it was so bad. Yeah, so then they gave me some TED stockings, which took hours and hours to find. But obviously the ladies in the women's assessment unit didn't know what they were trying to find, because they were like, oh, does anybody have extra massive TED stockings, It's like, yeah, way to make your patient feel really good about themselves. And then she'd ring up the next person and she said, oh, do you have like extra large stockings, And she's like yelling it out over a loudspeaker, and it felt terrible, So that wasn't good. Eventually, like probably half an hour later, she came back with some, but they were too small, but it's all they had. So apparently my calf is 68 or something, or 67.5 inch, I think, inch or centimetre, I don't know. Anyway, and then probably centimetre, I would say. But yeah, the stockings that I was given was 66, so they're actually too small. But it's all I have, so I have to wear them. And they keep bunching up because of how small they are, and it really hurts. So I was told to wear them for 7 days, and they said they were going to put me on blood thinners, but no one's got back to me about what blood thinners I should have. And I just rang them today, and now they say, oh, you have to wait a week before we do your blood thinners, so who knows what's happening with that. Anyway, I've been taking aspirin really sporadically, like I've had 2 or 3 low dose ones. But yeah, they've made my blood flow really bad, because, yeah, obviously blood thinner, So, yeah. They said that I could bleed it for up to 6 weeks, which I think is normal. So that's pretty much that. Baby was still in there because of the breathing problems, but slowly his oxygen levels were reduced and he was taken off the gavage eventually, and then I was able to just feed him by breastfeeding and top-ups. So that was good. And then I was a boarder for 2 days after I was discharged, so I could be there to breastfeed him on demand. And they kept waking me up like every 2 or 3 or 4 hours to breastfeed, and it was really hard. The hardest thing about that was that I had to cater for everything that was going on. So there was one really kind of abrupt midwife or whatever, and she always wanted me to do things when she wanted them done. So she would come in and she would say, oh, actually there was 2 of them. I was thinking of a different one. 2 abrupt ones. So yeah, this first abrupt one, she said, oh, you have to come back ASAP so that you can get your perineum checked or something like that, even though I was due to breastfeed for the next half hour or so. So I was like, okay, well, do I feed my child or do I get it checked, And she kept ringing me up like every 5 minutes, and she was like, oh, well, you need to be here, I haven't got all day, kind of thing. But, if I have to feed the kid, I have to feed the kid. What do you do, So I just stayed there, and she got really annoyed. And then when I went back there, she was gone. She'd have left her shift or whatever. So I don't know. But I was only gone for 10 minutes or something like that. I rushed back over there because I knew how annoyed she was. And just things like, breakfast was served at 7 a.m, but 7 a.m. was his next feed time. So I was like, well, do I eat or do I go and feed my baby, Eventually I learned that I could just request for the dinner to be left there and make sure that a midwife who I trust was able to, make sure that it was left there for when I got back. Most of the time it was cold, but hey, it's food, so that's okay. But yeah, they kept serving me like coffee and stuff, even though I don't drink coffee, and the caffeine makes you more dehydrated, which isn't good for the breastfeeding and stuff. So I don't really understand the menu, but anyway. Yeah. And the other abrupt midwife kept telling me things, like I'd ask a question and she'd be like, oh, what do you think? And I said, well, I asked the question because I don't know the answer, obviously. And, she would just be kind of rude and stuff. But yeah, I don't know. That's just my take on that. So yeah, the first night I had to pay about $17 to stay in the room. And there was another girl in there called, I don't know her name, but her baby was called India. And she was really, really preemie. And she'd been in there for 6 weeks. And she was finally able to go home. Yeah. She just kept making baby talk noises all night to the baby. Like goo 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 ga 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 and things like that. And it was really driving me up the wall. So I didn't get much sleep the first night. Because she was very, very talkative to the baby. And her husband or partner or whatever stayed in the room for pretty much the entire stay. The entire night, even though you're not supposed to. He was in there from like 9 p.m, which is when visitors are supposed to go home, even the husband, until probably like 2 a.m. So I didn't get much sleep. I had 2 other people in my rooms next to me because I was there for so long. The other lady was hard of hearing, and when her baby had the hearing test, it turned out that the baby was probably deaf. So she kept crying all night. It was kind of sad, But I tried talking to her. I said, oh, how did your birth go? And she just said, oh, hello. So I couldn't really talk to her much. So that 2 days or so was a bit rough because I didn't have anyone to talk to except my husband and maybe like 2 visitors who came. Yeah. So that was okay. And because she was deaf, she kept yelling. So whenever a midwife came in, she would yell at the midwife. And then the midwife would not understand why and she'd yell back. So it's kind of annoying. I can't remember the other one, to be honest. I was too zonked, so yeah. So that's probably enough about that. yeah, so that's my birth story in a nutshell anyway.